Hello, this HighByte Intelligence Hub video captures methods for obtaining industrial data with Intelligence Hub and modeling that data and sending it to AWS endpoints. If I check on the HighByte website, I can see that there's multiple options for exchanging data with AWS, including the services listed here. What we see most frequently is solutions that exchange and provide data to S3, SiteWise, and IoT Core. So we'll cover those. So moving to Intelligence Hub, you can see that connections have been made to those three AWS services. But what I'll do is I'll just start real quickly with the source data. So we're obtaining data from KEP Server EX, which is a leading OPC UA server I've authenticated securely. I can browse the namespace of tags, and you can see that I've previously created some very simple inputs that I'll use. I've also connected to a SQL Server database, and we could relate data between OPC UA and SQL Server, but in this case, it's very simple. I've located my SQL Server and authenticated, and I can create connection inputs. I have a very simple connection input here that returns sales order information um, from the uh, from the database, and I can also, explore the different databases on my server and build queries as well, just via drag and drop into this query builder. So that's my source data. Modeling is very important in Intelligence Hub. So Intelligence Hub just doesn't merely move industrial data to the cloud, but provides the ability to model it. And here we have examples of very simple models that I'll use for this demonstration. And my model obtains sales order information from a database. It obtains telemetry data from OPC-UA, process parameters from OPC-UA, and those are all combined into a payload where I have the ability to create the attributes, and that's what I've done here. And each of these attributes has configuration available for them, and I can, of course, create new attributes very easily here if I want to. So that's a model. That's the data that I'll be using to create the solutions. And I'll move to the solution for S3 first. And I have created a pipeline. That pipeline is it's a little bit complex because I'm actually sending data to the internal Intelligence Hub MQTT broker as well, just so we have visibility to the data. You can see that the flow is currently running as indicated with all the good green statuses. It's enabled. Every 1 minute, this pipeline is being executed and it's obtaining data from an instance. I'll take a look at that instance in a moment here. And what's happening is we're looking at a pipeline that's already been built via stages. There's various stages, and those stages can just be dragged and dropped onto um, the canvas here. So one stage I'm using in this case is a breakup um, stage, and I'm also using a size buffer stage. So what this pipeline does is it obtains data, modeled data. It, in the case of the MQTT output, for visibility and diagnostic purposes, I can move to the Intelligence Hub UNS client, and I can see that for this S3 connection, I'm outputting the entire payload here, just as you'd expect from the model data, and I'm also breaking that up into individual components. That's not necessary for S3. It's just showing capability. But what I'm doing in the case of S3 is I've used a size buffer stage, and that's configurable. And what I'm doing is as data from multiple assets might move through this pipeline, I'm buffering the records, 10 records, I'm sorry, 5 records for each asset before I create a CSV and send that file to S3. And you can see the bucket that I'm sending it to, and I'm creating I'm dynamically creating a file name based on the buffered asset ID and also the time and date stamp. So that is the format of the file that's being created in S3. So you can easily create this pipeline. As you can see, I can drag and drop the stages onto the canvas, configure the stages, and I have a pipeline that's sending data to S3. So let's take a look at the source data. The source data is modeled data in an instance. So we had previously looked at the model, and this is an instance of the model where I've mapped data. So that's my payload. And what I previously did in the case of my pressure attribute, for example, I've used my reference pane to associate a previously created connection input, that's obtaining data from the process, and I just drag and drop and I map that into this expression pane, and I've already done that. Um, but here you can also see that I'm using JavaScript to format the data that I've previously mapped. So mapping, you know, just to complete it might look like something like this. If I can just use a reference if I'm not using JavaScript, then I just drag and drop that in. And that's my data just once more. So that's being used, of course, in the pipeline. So back to the pipeline that we were previously looking at, and the pipeline is sending data to S3. So let's take a look at S3 and see what that looks like. I have multiple files that have been created. Those files are created per asset. If I have multiple assets, and we should expect that each file contains 5 records. And that's just the choice that I've made. We were often buffering data in a file, that's being sent to a file and the data lake, just to perhaps save on storage and compute costs, and just send a batch of data. Of course, that has to be reconciled versus latency requirements. So that's S3, just a real quick overview. If we move to next to IoT Core, we can use an Intelligence Hub. Um, we can use an Intelligence Hub pipeline again. And with IoT Core, I have a pipeline that's already running, very similar. I get that modeled instance data in. The instance very similar to what we saw before. I'm sending it to 2 outputs. They're both MQTT outputs, so we'll see this data, being published and viewed also in Intelligence Hub. The Intelligence Hub broker is sending the data here, and very similar payload broken up. But we're also using the Intelligence Hub um, MQTT client to publish data to IoT Core. And that's configured here. So the specific topic name that I'm sending to is this connection output. So I'll just copy that so I have reference to it. And then we're also sending the broken up, payload, each individual attribute to IoT Core as well. So if I move to IoT Core in the test client, I can subscribe to a topic. And I think this is being sent every 5 or 10 seconds. So what we should expect to see is, the each individual attribute here broken up, temperature, humidity, etc., but also the entire payload. And there it is. So the entire payload. So you have options, of course, how data can be formatted, and that is modeled data being sent from Intelligence Hub to IoT Core. And then finally, we'll take a look at SiteWise. And with SiteWise, I have a little bit different models. I have a model where I'm sending metrics for a line, and also a model for the status of a motor with the maintenance information in amps and speed. So obviously, those metric values are just being simulated, and this is the data for the motor. But I've also used namespaces. So my namespace here is defining the structure of the data, and I have lines and a motor in each line. And that's interesting because Intelligence Hub can not only send data to SiteWise, the instances for the motor and both motors and the lines, but also the structure. So I can build out a similar hierarchical structure in SiteWise using Intelligence Hub. So if I move to that pipeline and enable it, and we'll send that data every 10 seconds, but the first thing that we need to do is create that structure in SiteWise. And if I look at my assets, I actually have to do one more configuration change here. I'll just save my connection. I'm sending data every 10 seconds. And it built the models, and then it's starting to build the assets. So Intelligence Hub can build the structures. So that's just based on that payload being sent, that hierarchical payload, and it's building out the asset structures. And then once that structure has been created, as you see here, then the measurements start being updated, every 10 seconds, and you can see that we already have some data that's been sent to SiteWise. So just to summarize and close, we've created, I actually haven't shown these yet. We've created connections to IoT Core, authenticating here with certificates that have been created in AWS. So a secure connection to IoT Core and the ability to create outputs or reference those in a pipeline, a connection to S3 where I have an access key and a security key. And all of these connection configurations are defined within instructions within our knowledge base, so they're easy to create. And here with SiteWise, again, an access key and a secret key. In each case, we're indicating what region, and here I can specify, the bucket that we're writing to when we have buffered ingest configured for that SiteWise connection. So three options for obtaining data from industrial sources and sending that data to AWS endpoints with Intelligence Hub. Thank you very much.